Chiefs struck gold in 2022 at running back. What does it look like in 2023? Today on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, everybody. Your favorite position to talk about. Everybody's interested in running back. We're going to run it down today and take a look at who goes into camp, who can make some headway in camp, and what does this season look like? I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting, NFL33.com, as well as RGR Football. He's Chris Clark from Chiefs Corner. Thanks for making us your first listen. Make sure you check out another Locked On show for your next listen, because we're here every day of the week, 5 days a week on every channel, especially for the NFL. You can get subbed on YouTube, where we start, as well as audio at Apple, at Spotify, at Stitcher, at every conceivable platform on audio that you could think of. You can have it. We appreciate that, and we look forward to listening to us there. If you want to get it on the text action, you can do that at 816-357-8781 and get connected with us then. Here we go. We're going to wrap up first week of roster review so that we know what's going on when we go into camp, and that you guys have an idea of who's battling for what spots. I'm excited about running back for the first time, because we might see more of it this year.
It's possible, and it's really going to be curious as to how they really decide to go in this direction. I think they're going to keep three. They've kept four in the past. I think that's still a possibility. But with the roster the way it's looking right now, do you keep an extra wide receiver instead of maybe a fourth running back? Do you keep another offensive lineman instead of a running back? Lots to talk about when you start talking about that position, though there's not much question about who the starter is going to be going into 2023.
No, I don't think so. And this is how the roster looks right now. If you are listening on audio, make sure you jump over and check out the website for YouTube, because you want to see this as well. I'm about to share what the Chiefs roster looks like officially. And yes, there's some names that you recognize. Certainly, Isaiah Pacheco has stolen what is the major portion of the touches. You can call him the starter. I still think it's going to be a timeshare, but he's clearly surrounded himself enough to be number one. Now, he had a couple of injury issues we talked about in the offseason. We'll run that down here in a second. But the other guys on this list, he did. And that's an important factor as well. You still have the last year of the rookie contract for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's still on this roster. Jerrick McKinnon is now back. You have the rookie in Deneric Prince. I wish I had a picture for him, but he's on here. Then you have backup LaMichael Pirine, and then you have the asterisk case that we'll talk about later. That is Jerrion Ealy. If you're seeing it on YouTube here, you can see the Chiefs official roster. Ealy is actually listed in a slightly different way. But if we go to our lads, and we appreciate our friends over at Our Lads for the work that they do in keeping track of the rosters and the supposed depth charts. It is always a projection, but it is something to keep an eye on. Isaiah Pacheco is the clear starter, and I feel like there's room for him to improve in year two, particularly if they get to the point where he can just have a hole that he wants to go to, or an area that he wants to go to. And if there's a simple cutback option, easy. It's a 1-2 decision-making point. I think that will actually help him out. Downfield vision's a little bit something that I think he can improve upon. There's upside there. But being able to hit what I think is this team's, and Andy Reid's honestly preferred strength in outside zone run game, is probably what they're going back to this year. And I like that for Pacheco.
Yeah, it should be good for him. And I think that when you start looking at Pacheco in particular, the question isn't whether or not he's going to be the starter. The question isn't really whether or not he's going to be the guy that's going to get most of the touches, especially running the ball. The question is how does he expand his game from last year? And I do think that actually is going to play a big part in not necessarily who they keep, but how they rotate running backs. Because you look at what they did last year, McKinnon was the next guy off the bench for most of the season. Clyde got hurt, so that played a part in it. But McKinnon also had a very particular role, came in on third down a lot, was your personal protector of the quarterback from the running back position, and caught the ball a lot. The question is can Pacheco get to a point where he can use his hands more and catch the ball out of the backfield, be a guy that can be in there on third down, and be the protector of Mahomes at times? Because I think that actually helps them. If he can fill that role in some regards, it actually helps them, because then you can keep McKinnon off the field for a ton of snaps, and you have a better chance at those two both being healthy going into the latter part of the season in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think so as well. And it's funny, our lads list McKinnon as the backup here. It is a 1-2 punch. And I think an area that Pacheco can improve upon is the pass catching and more importantly, the ability to run the routes. I don't think the hands are an issue. Right. But what else can you do to maintain leverage on particularly linebacker coverage? But if you're going to start to get some safety coverage, I think that's one that he's going to have to take a step forward in understanding how to attack a given coverage pattern. And that takes recognition, and it takes a while to learn. But I do think that that's there. The question for me is, in being able to what I think should be a return to more outside zone, probably a little bit less power in terms of the blocking scheme with Donovan Smith and Jawaan Taylor set to start at tackle. We're going to talk about the offensive line coming up next week, folks. We are here every day for you, so make sure you check that out. But do you feel like that's more of an opportunity for Pacheco in the run game or less?
It's going to be interesting to see how those guys play out on the offensive line. You feel good about the interior three, and I feel good about Jawaan Taylor, though he's not the run blocker that maybe you had at right tackle last year. But he is, I think, a big upgrade over Andrew Wiley when it comes to pass blocking. So it's a trade-off. You would love to have those guys be great at both. I'm not saying Taylor is horrible, but he's not. I don't think he's the same type of run blocker that Wiley was. I think that's one of the things that Wiley did very well, and I think that helped the running game. So that's going to be something to watch. But I do think Taylor is capable of that. The other thing that really becomes the question when you start talking about Pacheco and McKinnon and those types of guys is the screen game. It's one of Andy Reid's keys every single season is the screen game. And you can go look at what does Mitchell Schwartz say? What does Jeff Schwartz say? What did the guys that go and watch all the films say about Andy Reid's screen game? Guys that have played in the system that know how intricate that screen game is. It also comes down to the running back being able to hit the hole right, being able to, and it doesn't necessarily have to be running back, but generally it is any player to be able to hit where they're supposed to be, when they're supposed to be there, to set up the blockers for it to be effective.
Yeah, it's key. And I think that those are two things. Both the outside zone plays to Jawaan Taylor's strengths. So does the screen game. Donovan Smith, obviously at an older pace, I think can set up to the left as well. But I think both of them are upgrading the screen game over the previous tackles on both sides. So that also takes a little bit of read. And I think that's a role that Pacheco has to grow into. But clearly, some other guys deeper on the depth chart have more experience at that, and I think are going to be able to perform well. So how does that play in for Jerrick McKinnon and Clyde Edwards-Helaire? Where do they sit on this depth chart going into training camp? We'll get to that right after we talk about your chance right now to get in on the action. And that's because the place that you're going is the place everybody wants to go. It's that high time right now for Major League Baseball. I was just at a game a little bit ago, and you can check that out at FanDuel and get in the action. And when you do, you take your first swing at a bet, and you can get 10 times your first bet amount back in bonus bets if it loses. That's up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20, and you'll land $200 in bonus bets back in your account. Win or lose, that's the big bonus. That's $200 you can get for spending on anything from the money line, the runs batted in, anything that you can find that you're interested in is available over at FanDuel. Now, that app is super safe, simple, and easy to use, and that makes things really comfy. When you want to get paid instantly, you can do that. There's no better place for the MLB or the NFL on FanDuel, and that's America's #1 sportsbook. So right now, go sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon. You can see it right here, and it's also in our description notes if you're on YouTube, as well as the podcast. And you can get $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon right now. At FanDuel, the official partner of the MLB, the NBA, and your NFL. NFL is a lot of fun. Betting on running backs is a little bit troublesome. We talked about the fantasy aspect of it a couple weeks ago. You want to get into it too, but this is the thing that I don't think is changing in Kansas City. Is it's going to be a committee. So it's not who's the starter and who's the backup. It's what's the share of targets, of snaps in general. And that's where this gets a little tricky. And Chris thinks he has the idea. We might disagree. That's okay. That's okay.
No, I disagree with you just a little bit. And where I disagree is it may go even a step further. And it could go into who do you play in the given week? What is the best scheme that is going to be, that you're going to be able to use against the team you're playing against? Is the team that you're playing against better against the run? Or are they better against covering running backs? Are they good at the screen game? What is their strength? What is their weaknesses? And that could also play a big factor into who's going to be the guy that's going to get the lion's share of the touches, not just carries, but touches, especially when it gets into the passing game.
I agree. I'm looking generally for an uptick in touches overall. We know that the evolution of the passing game has to continue. I think that's still going to provide more opportunities for them to run more. And I think if they get back to their bread and butter, where the coaching staff is comfortable with, what the players are comfortable with, there will be more carries. But you're right. It's about overall touches. And it comes down to value versus reward. And Jerrick McKinnon was elite at the running back position in pass catching, particularly in touchdowns last season. Another year older, but certainly a guy that I think they did a decent job of keeping the wear off of him last season. Can he be the true number 2 right now, given Clyde's investment in the whole situation with Clyde, which Clyde Edwards-Helaire does not seem happy to be in Kansas City any longer. But this is the only way to get out and get paid, is to perform well when you do get touches. Do you think that he pushes to be the primary backup at this point?
He can try, and it's in his best interest to be that guy. It's in some ways, it's almost Kansas City's best interest for him to be that guy, because if you get him a lot of snaps, get him a lot of touches, that puts less wear and tear on Pacheco, puts less wear and tear on McKinnon, and Clyde can do some of the things that Pacheco and McKinnon can do. I'm not saying he's the same type of running back, but I do think that if you can keep the wear and tear off your top 2, which I still think is going to be Pacheco and McKinnon, then it's a good thing to have if you have the ability to do that with Clyde. The big question mark, and this is the thing that we're doing right now before camp starts, the big question mark is Clyde going to be on the roster when camp ends and when the season starts? That's the question that we don't have an answer to, because there is another running back that's sitting out there in free agency that if they get a deal done with Chris Jones, I don't know. I don't think that they're going to go out and get a Dalvin Cook, but stranger things have happened. Kansas City has done some things that you don't expect, and everybody thinks they're going to go out and get a guy like Hopkins. Maybe they go and they get a running back instead.
I have trouble seeing that for all the investment purposes. So I think right now Clyde is on this roster for the season. I don't think they part ways unless there's some kind of crazy interest from someone else that loved him out of LSU that feels that they can put him in a position to excel. I don't think there's going to be much interest in trading him. So do you cut ties on a first-round draft pick just to bring in a Dalvin Cook?
I don't expect that they're going to do Dalvin Cook. My point is that if there's a guy on this roster that would be a guy that maybe they could cut or they could trade before the start of the season, this is the one I would expect. I would expect that Clyde is a guy that they could maybe possibly look at moving or getting or cutting. I don't think they're going to get Dalvin Cook because I think Cook wants to start or at least get paid very well. But my point is if you're looking for a veteran or you think that he would, if he was willing to come in for a cheap contract because he wants to chase a title, I could see that move being made. Now, the thing about Clyde is, the other thing is, does he get outplayed or does he stay healthy? That's the other big question. We've been talking about all these players as they're going to be healthy going into the regular season. If Clyde gets hurt in the preseason, does he get replaced by a guy like Deneric Prince? To where maybe Clyde ends up on IR or is cut before the season starts because Prince shows that he can play and shows value. And then you, like I said at the start of this, it's a question of how many you're going to be able to keep. You would think they're going to keep 4 because that's what they've done in the past. Is that going to be the case this year with all the other positions that they have talent? We've talked about wide receiver. It's pretty deep, and you have questions there. We've talked about tight end. It's, I wouldn't say horribly deep, but it's still, you're still probably going to keep 4, I would think. O-line's going to be a problem this year. D-line could be a problem this year. There are lots of different positions where they're going to have to make decisions. Corner and safety we've talked about as well.
And those shows are coming up, folks. Remember, we are here 5 days a week, so tune in with us. If you're not an everyday or a ret, our everyday listeners call themselves locos, and we love that. So become one of them. Get subbed here on YouTube as well as the audio platforms. But we have to go into those position groups, and you have a good point in that health is always the issue with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. There's never been a point where you feel 100% going into a season. And that said, could there be a parting of the ways? Possibly. I don't know if there's any upside to that right now. We'll see how Prince produces, because Prince is the next guy on the roster. And I think if they do keep 4, I think Prince would be the man to make it. If they don't, it would have to be, he'd have to clearly be ready to play more so than Edwards-Helaire is right now. Because, going in with Pacheco and McKinnon, you feel like you're going to be prepared. And so it's not just, who's better on the depth chart, but it's also who's ready to play against NFL defenses. That's going to be the question for me with Prince. But that said, we like what we've seen in OTAs. We hear that things are going well and he's picking up the offense as he needs to. There is something to be said about his style. I want to talk about that, as well as who are the dark horses for this position after we get back. Now, you mentioned Deneric Prince, and I think there's a good deal to talk about him.
Yeah, there is. Really quick, I do want to say something, and this is something that we need to also take into consideration when we start getting into training camp, we start getting into preseason games. One of the things that always throws people off is you'll see a running back, and you've got guys in the past that have done this as well, that come in and against fourth stringers just go off. Watch for that and see where they're coming in, see where they're playing, see who they're playing against. That gives you a pretty good indication of how the team feels. And that happens at all positions. But running back specifically, you get into a situation where you bring in a guy against a fourth string unit. Well, if he's playing against guys that aren't going to be in the NFL in 2 months, it's not going to matter. He may look all pro, but it's not going to be the same going up against starters every day and going up against even just normal backups in the NFL. So what does Prince show? That's going to be the big question mark. And then you get into the other guys that they have on the roster as well.
Well, and the thing about Prince, and this is where I come back to similarity. It is possible to see that, we were cautiously, I think legitimately cautious last year about Pacheco himself coming in saying that he wanted to take the starting job. Now, if it wasn't for a Clyde Edwards-Helaire injury, maybe that doesn't happen. And maybe he's not a 1,000-yard rusher. But he clearly outperformed what our expectation was as a rookie, given what he did in college. Same thing could be true for Prince. And the other reason that I bring that up is it's very hard to hit like that on a seventh rounder. You guys can see here if you're watching on YouTube, Pacheco, 7th round selection. Prince, college free agent. But it's very hard to hit on either of those unless a couple of things go your way and that you adapt to what you're doing. The good thing for Prince,
I was just gonna say, but running back is one of the positions that it is easier at. Go ahead. Sorry.
It is. And the good thing for Prince is Pacheco's already done some of the work for him.
Yep.
Is they've got those styles taken care of. They're adapting the offense to, I think, help Pacheco. And Prince's style is very, very similar. So there is less of a shifting of gears if Prince were to come in for Pacheco in relief than, say, McKinnon or Helaire. Like, you could do the same things. Now, I think that comes with a lot of the same limitations as well. So if you are looking to do the downfield passing, the things that McKinnon and Edwards are probably better at, then you still want to shift those gears. But if you're looking to continue what you're doing, I think Prince is a really steady comparative replacement for Pacheco that, if he has the spark that I think he has, could be like a 1-2 punch that doesn't change your style on a given drive, say.
Yeah, and if that ends up being the case, that's better for Kansas City. I mean, they'd be in a situation where they have two guys that are very similar. Then you don't have to change the offense a lot if one of those guys goes down, and you're in a better situation. You're not going to be having the same scenario with a guy like McKinnon that if Pacheco goes down. You're not going to have that with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Like you said, you're in a situation where if you can get a similar runner that actually helps your offense be consistent and be something that can be, not necessarily one-for-one replaceable, but close enough to where it's not going to hurt your offense as much as maybe having to change completely because you don't have that style of running back anymore. The other guys on the roster, we haven't talked about your buddy. We haven't talked about one of your favorite guys, but there's another one as well.
Michael Piran is a guy that's been around a little bit. He's 25. I think he's got a little bit of upside too. I think there's plenty of room on this roster for practice squad running backs. I think he's a good option there until, again, we see something in camp where you spark against, third, fourths isn't going to do it. If you want to break in, you got to do it against at least backups, if not the starters. Can we see that? It's a possibility. I think that he's got potential. I don't know the health state or if that explosiveness is still there as much as we've seen in the past. So I'm going to say that Michael Piran ends up on the practice squad and is a viable emergency break glass guy if there's a slew of injuries. We know that this team goes through attrition, right? But the guy that's really intriguing to me is Jerrion Ealy, who was a running back, came in, they moved in a wide receiver. Now he's kind of listed as both. But I do think he, again, is a guy that fits into the McKinnon style. And as McKinnon gets older, he's a young guy that is going to be on the border. If they were to choose to part ways with Clyde Edwards-Helaire this season, he might be a guy that could then make it as a backup to McKinnon's style. Then you have Prince as a direct backup for Pacheco, and then you have Ealy as a guy that can do a lot of things that McKinnon can. Obviously, the experience levels you're never going to match, but like in terms of physicality and skill set. But that's a long shot. I still see him right now as a borderline practice squad guy, unless there's injuries in camp.
Yeah, unless he shows up and takes over and is able to show a skill set that converts between wide receiver and running back. There's a possibility there. We think that they're going to keep 7 wide receivers. But if you get to a position where you have a guy like Ealy and he shows that he should belong on this roster and he should be playing, or somebody that could be active on game days, then you're in a situation where your 4th running back, more than likely, or maybe he becomes 3rd in order to make the roster, is a guy that can step in and go play outside if need be, or not necessarily outside, but, as a slot. That gives you more flexibility. And what is one of the biggest things that Andy Reid and Brett Veach talk about all the time? It's be flexible, be able to play multiple positions. And I'm not saying he's going to be a wide receiver, but one of the things that came out after the Super Bowl, and this was just, I think, a month ago, is Clyde came out and said that they had him line up as a wide receiver the week before the Super Bowl because they had so many injuries at the position. So there's a thought process there that you're going to need to use possibly some of those guys to fill that position. Ealy may have a step up in that regard.
Yeah, there's a number of ways that you could go about it. I think there's plenty of value there. The question will be, is there opportunity? A lot has to come. Again,
to be clear,
Chris Jones.
I just will say, to be clear, I don't think Ealy's going to be that guy. I don't think he's going to push himself on the roster that way. Okay. But that's how he would do it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's still a possibility. Again, it comes down to Chris Jones. If they were to elect to go get D-Hop, that would pretty much take out Dalvin Cook, in my opinion. So I think Clyde would be there. Either way, you have to beat somebody out. And I think he's still got it in him. I want to see how he looks carrying the rock as well. And obviously, his pass pro had to improve to get with McKinnon. If that's come along, that might be a big step in the right. We'd like to know what you guys think. Who belongs on the practice squad? And is there 3 or are there 4? If so, who belongs in the running back room on the 53-man roster as we get ready for camp? We're looking forward to it. This group is always a lot of fun. But they have a lot of things to live up to, and there might be some changes coming on the run game itself. So thanks for being with us. We'll be back with you. Make sure that we're going through this whole roster before camp. Thanks for being here today, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.